Happy Hanukkah to all of the lions and pomegranates out there. This is for you and yours on this holiday of dedication. This is a song I wrote called To Be a Light. When I fall, I will rise. In the dark, you're my light. I will walk, love will lead, in the search for one's in need. And I want to know what it means to be a light. Light a candle, say a prayer, shine a light on darkness somewhere. There is hope, this I trust, for the gracious, for the just. And I want to know what it means to be a light. I want us to mean it, 'cause we hear it every year. I want us to feel it and reveal we're past the fear. It's not just an echo that we let go and forget, 'cause nothing burns deeper than the fires of regret. Hear the beating of the drums, start the singing, feel the hum. There are answers deep inside. Pay attention, open your eyes, and I want to know what it means to be a light. I want us to mean it, 'cause we hear it every year. I want us to feel it and reveal we're past the fear. It's not just an echo that we let go and forget, 'cause nothing burns deeper than the fires of regret. I want to know what it is to be a light. I wanna know what it is to be a light. I wanna know what it is to be a light. I wanna know. I want us to mean it, 'cause we hear it every year. I want us to feel it and reveal we're past the fear. It's not just an echo that we let go and forget, 'cause nothing burns deeper than the fires of regret. Nothing burns deeper than the fires of regret. And there's no tomorrow. Happy Hanukkah.
Welcome to the Ann Baer Memorial Women of Valor event, and happy Hanukkah. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Elise Papp, and I am thrilled to be here with my daughter Adrienne as the co-chairs of this year's event. Although we wish that we could all gather in person today, it still warms my heart to see so many familiar names online, and we genuinely appreciate you taking the time to join us. The philanthropic impact we have made as Lions of Judah and Pomegranates is greater today than it has ever been, and that is a powerful thing, because it is needed like never before. As I look at all of your names logged in at today's event, I see the many roles we've played during our lifetimes. I see givers, activists, leaders, and caretakers. And I want to acknowledge that some of us have taken on new and larger roles brought on by the crisis that has overwhelmed so many in the last few years. Unprecedented demand has increased our commitment to civic mindedness and awakened an aching need to be part of something bigger. Together, we continue to step up by donating our time, expertise, and resources when we see people hurting in our Jewish community.
One of the many valuable things I learned from my mom, who in turn learned from her mother and grandmother, is to be authentic and true to yourself. I'm so proud to be with her today, and with all of you, as an example of the tradition of Lador Vador, making connections across generations, both within our families and in solidarity with all the women in our community. When we come together, we have the power to open hearts and minds across lines of difference and build relationships of mutual trust. Doing so is essential to building communities that are both resilient and responsive, ensuring the physical, mental, and financial well-being of people we care about to reemerge with stronger organizations after a deadly pandemic, and to always speak up against hatred and anti-Semitism, never letting it go unchecked.
Today, we're going to hear from two women who have dedicated themselves to building a more connected, empathetic, and dynamic world. The Judith Chapman Memorial Women's Leadership Award recipient Joyce Linker and Emory University professor of Modern Jewish History and Holocaust Studies, Dr. Deborah Lipstadt.
We encourage you all to participate in the group chat on the right side of your screen. Though we can't see your faces, know that we are listening and we want to hear from you. If you run into any technical difficulties, send us a note in the chat and our team will reach out to help. After these fantastic speakers, we invite you all to join our schmooze rooms to connect with each other face to face, discuss what you heard, and share what you are excited about. But first, I'd like to give a warm welcome to Danny Grossman, CEO of the Federation.
Thanks, Elise and Adrian, and thank you very much for chairing this year's event. I also want to thank our event's host committee and the Judith Chapman Memorial Leadership Award Selection Committee. Your guidance and commitment to women's philanthropy has enabled us to stay connected, even as we sadly must remain apart. To everyone in attendance, especially to our lions and our pomegranates, your support by way of your annual campaign gift has made it possible for us to take immediate action during this time of urgent need. Among other things, you helped relieve financial hardship from pandemic-stricken families, small businesses, and synagogues at risk of closing. You helped fund books through PJ Library and opened camps for children and teens, enabling a human connection where it was sorely lacking. You helped create gateways for people of all ages and backgrounds to express their identities and their Jewish values in ways that are personally meaningful. And you help plant roots for a strong and growing shared society in Israel with our Israeli partner organizations. In the next few weeks, you will receive our most recent annual report, which will highlight in more detail the tremendous positive impact that you have helped enable this past year. As most of you know, I'm preparing to step down as CEO of the Federation at the end of this month after almost 7 years. Given how much I love the mission, the Federation, the community, and the people in it, it's a bittersweet decision. Among my greatest joys have been working and interacting with many of you. I have so much respect and appreciation for all that you do for the community. Because of you, our community is finding its way out of the darkness. You have been our light. It feels even more meaningful on this fourth night of Hanukkah to say, may we go from strength to strength and continue to ignite the spark that lights the way. I now have the pleasure of introducing our Judith Chapman Memorial Women's Leadership Award. Judith Chapman was an esteemed volunteer, leader, friend, and mentor in our Jewish community. I was privileged to work with her on the JCRC board, and I was always inspired by her commitment. This award was established in 1999 to honor a woman who exemplifies outstanding volunteer leadership and who has expressed her Jewish values by supporting the overall well-being of our Jewish community. I cannot think of a woman more deserving than Joyce Linker. the 2021 Judith Chapman Memorial Women's Leadership Award recipient. Here to interview Joyce, to find out what makes this powerhouse tick, is another powerhouse, Marilyn Waldman.
Well, it's a pleasure for me to interview this year's recipient of the Judith Chapman Women's Leadership Award. Joyce Linker and I go back a long way, like 60 years when we were sorority sisters at the University of Michigan. And I've witnessed Joyce as she has grown and developed into a prominent leader in our Jewish community and our general community. Joyce leads with humor, with grace, and is a very strategic thinker. Are there any things you want to say first before I ask you some questions?
I think I'm just absolutely overwhelmed by the fact that I got this award. And I remember years ago going to Marilyn's award that she got, and I'm so flattered to be in the group. And in my wildest dreams, I never thought the two of us actually would end up here sitting across from each other and talking about this. So,
and
it's
leadership
wonderful.
in the Jewish community in San Francisco.
Yeah, none of that.
Well, let's go back a ways. And where did you grow up, and how has that influenced your connection to the Jewish community in San Francisco?
I grew up in Detroit. You were in Cleveland. We both went to Michigan, as you said. I went to Mumford High School, which is a pretty famous Detroit high school, but Detroit was in those days very segregated by religion as well. And if a realtor sold a person of the wrong faith or color a house in the neighborhood, they were fired. So we lived in the neighborhood where everyone was Jewish except for a handful of people. But that's where I grew up. And my parents were very hardworking, middle-class people.
Mm-hmm. I understand, and I knew you founded the Young Adult Division of the Federation here in the 60s with Herb Rabin. How did that come about?
Well, Mary, you've heard this many times from me, but for everyone else, when I was growing up, you dated Jewish boys, and I was a teacher, and we were supposed to marry a doctor. We had certain rules. I came out to California, and the first thing I wanted to do was meet some non-Jewish boys, but at one point I decided enough. And we had met Irv, and I said to Irv, I heard about a group from another city where they had young adults, single, get together. And so Irv was a great salesman, and he sold the Federation on the idea. And so we had an event where you had to be over 21 years old and give a pledge to the Federation of over $21, which was a big deal then. And that's how YAD started. And when we had the celebration of, I forget how many years, I think 50 years of it or something like that, people stood up and said how many had met at that event over the years.
Met and married?
Met and married at YAD.
Well, that was the beginning of your leadership here,
Believe
I would
me.
say. You went back to school after having 3 children to get your MBA and become a financial advisor. How have you used this expertise, let's call it, in your Jewish communal work?
Well, first, one correction is when I went back to get my MBA, I didn't really have anything in mind as to what I would do. I ended up the way as a financial advisor by accident. And do you want me to explain how?
Yeah, how did that happen?
It's all related to the Federation because I was really originally a 6th grade teacher. And the first time I went back to school after having 2 kids, because I was pregnant with the 3rd kid, was I went to Stanford and got a Master of Arts in Education, thinking when I went back to teach again, I'd want to be teaching something with art. And then after that, before I did anything else, people asked me to do this or that and everything, so I decided it was either law school or business school, and everybody talked me out of law school, thank goodness. So I went back to business school, but no one else knew that, and what happened was Brian Lurie gave me a call one day, because we were all buddies.
And he was head of Federation.
He was head of
then.
Federation, and said, we're starting this new Jewish museum at the Federation building, and we have a terrific board and a new director and everything. It was funded initially by his father-in-law, Alfred Fromm, at the time. And he said, but they're not good fundraisers. Will you come help raise money for that? And so I took on that job and I said yes, and he paid me for it.
What was the particular challenge?
The challenge was they wanted to start with $1 million endowment fund from the beginning. That's what they had decided. And
How much time did they give you to raise that?
it was about 3 or 4 months. Alfred Fromm had given them a couple of $100,000 and they needed a bunch of people to give the rest. So I started dialing for dollars. And at that point, and it's in this building, which is kind of funny, down in the basement, I had a friend, because I was living in Tiburon at the time, my kids had a friend rather, whose father worked at Montgomery Securities. He was a very big deal there. And he's Jewish, and so I thought, well, I should ask him. He'd have the capacity to give a gift. So I found out the names of 2 other Jewish men who worked at Montgomery, and I made dates to see them. So I go to their offices at Montgomery, and the first 2 guys I talked to said, yes, we'll give you this contribution. You want it, we love it, it's a good idea. Then I went to see the guy named Willie, who was my contact there, the person I really knew, who was
This is all for the new
the
contemporary
new,
Jewish.
New Jewish Museum of
Okay.
San Francisco at
Okay.
the time, what it was
Okay.
called. You got
Okay.
it, yes. And so I start giving Willie the spiel about the museum, and he says, you know, Joyce, I'm Jewish, my wife isn't, you know my kids, but for you, I'll give you the money. And I said, no, don't do me any favors. If you don't believe in it, I've explained to you what it's about. If you don't believe in it, don't do it. He said, really? I said, yes. He said, well, how have you done since you've been here? And I said, well, so-and-so gave me a gift, and so-and-so gave me a gift. He said, Seth gave you a gift, a pledge? I said, yeah. He said, you're in the wrong business. You ought to be working here. And I looked around at this open floor, and I'm thinking, what would I do here? He says, you come and talk to me. I think you should be working here. And that's changed my life.
And how long did you work for Montgomery Securities?
Well, I started at Montgomery in '85, and I was in the investment business, wealth advising business, till the end of 2019. So a while.
Joyce, you were the first woman board chairman at the San Francisco Jewish Community Center. What was that like?
Well, I was the first woman in a 100-year history, it turned out. But actually, it was great. And I owe it to another woman who was on the board, because in those days, you were nominated to be a secretary. And the men were nominated to be treasurer, then vice chair, and then chair. And so she said, I would like to nominate Joyce, but under one provision. She has to be able to become chair. And I guess they had some kind of discussion, I don't know what, but I was nominated, became chair, and I loved it. It was really a really wonderful experience. And I'll tell you one other story about it, because in those days, the JCC had a preschool. It was a real original idea. And everyone fought to get into that preschool because it was considered the best in the city. And the biggest fight we had on our board when I was chair was to decide if Jewish applicants had preference over non-Jews. And some people felt strongly you had to be Jewish, and then you got a better place in line. And I felt that it shouldn't be that way. And I said, you know, as long as we have enough non-Jews there that think it's a great school, then we shouldn't give preference to anyone. You get in the line, and you get in when you get in. And they finally agreed, yes, that's what we'll leave it. So that was interesting.
Well, it seems to me that Menorah Park next door
Yes.
happened kind of on your watch.
Yes. Actually, I helped negotiate some of the things to get a person from the outside world, you know, a real corporate person, to come in and manage that to manage the development and manage everything. So we work together with them. Yes.
That's been a real success, too.
Yeah.
In the general community, you've been very active in North Beach Citizens, which is a homeless nonprofit, and in political fundraising. I remember you founded the first Women Making History lunch for Barbara Boxer in 1982, and that was kind of the beginning of women's fundraising for political activities. And since then, you've led efforts for Nancy Pelosi and for Kamala Harris. Why is political activism important to you?
Well, let me start with Barbara Boxer first, because that was so many years ago before I had ever done anything political. You know, I mean, I read the paper and all
Well,
that.
how
but I
did you
never-
meet her, for example?
But I met her first. That's interesting. my husband and I and their kids were on a family vacation, and it turned out that Barbara and Stuart and her kids were on the same vacation, and we became friendly and ended up spending a lot of time together. And it was about the time she was running for Congress for the first time. She was running against another woman for the primary, and she wanted some help on the election. I said, well, I'll tell you what, when you're not running against this woman, when you win the first one, I'd like to help you. So she and I and another person who was a supporter of hers got together and came up with the idea of women making history, because she was going to be the first woman congresswoman from California in the history.
Big deal.
First woman, so it was going to be a big deal. So we came up with this concept of women making history, where we had a fundraiser to benefit her campaign, but we honored several women who had done unique, special things in their careers. And that event took on a meaning that was so interesting that we kept doing it maybe every 2 years. And then, you know, she had quite a career and terrific. So that was how that got started. And in the course of that, I met Kamala because she came in one day to my house, and we were having a pre-sale where you all get together and you meet the candidate in person and chat. And she came in to help. Yeah. And she said, I'd like to help. I didn't know who she was. She walks in, this very attractive, nice lady, and helped and was successful, and then ended up asking me to help her when she was running for office. And we were invited to her wedding to the Jewish boy. So that was really sweet. It was nice, yeah.
Okay, so you are now chairman of the Contemporary Jewish Museum for the second time.
Yes.
What has the CJM meant to you, and why is it so important?
I don't know where to start, Mayor, but it's like another child for me. I have 3 kids. Each of my kids is, I'm knock on wood, I'm lucky. They're sharp, they're terrific, but they're all 3 married to non-Jewish people. Mm-hmm. And CJM is really a wonderful place because of its inclusive nature. You don't have to be Jewish to go there to enjoy it. I like that attitude, and it's just turned out to be valuable. My kids have always loved the family gala, the grandchildren, and so on.
How many grandchildren?
I have 5 now. Mm-hmm. And they're raised with Hanukkah and break the fast and all of that, mostly around the food. But I just believe in the notion of being inclusive, and I like that part about the Jewish values that we have at the museum, which are including non-Jews, including people of color, just including everyone. So that's been very important to me.
And I guess they can learn about Judaism through the arts.
They learn about it through the arts. Mm-hmm. And what a nice way to learn about something new through the arts. I think we all understand how important art is.
To enriching our lives.
Exactly, and it enriches my life.
Mm-hmm. And what is your hope for the future generations in the San Francisco Jewish community and so forth?
I just hope that the adults in the community, all of us, the young, the old, whatever, can help pass along the traditions, the values, the culture, the food, all those things about being Jewish, tikkun olam, I mean, all the good things. And I think we need to be very welcoming to the next gen. And that's why one of the goals I know of our organization, and I think everyone, is to get more young people on our boards, more young people as an audience to the events that we put on. And I would say that the next generation is going to have a heavy load, but we hope that they'll succeed. But can I say thanks. And I know this isn't in your notes or my notes. It's because of her. So we were sorority sisters, and I learned a lot then from you. She's a year older, so that's why I followed in her footsteps. I don't mean to embarrass you. But anyhow, I really learned a lot from you. And we have some other sorority sisters in the area.
They call us the Michigan Mafia.
Well.
Whatever.
Yes, it's true. But anyway, I owe a lot to you.
Well, we've been through ups and downs together. And
I'll
it's
say
great
that.
Having a very, very good, smart, strategic friend.
Well, it's good having. I'm glad I had you. You taught me how to be a friend. I've told you that before.
You are the book that lights the spark, that ignites the tradition. You are the voice that conveys the beauty that fills the classroom. You are both the keeper of the flame that illuminates our history and the hand that passes the torch that will brighten our future. You are the ticket that launches a journey that awakens an identity. The fuel that powers the change that betters the world in ways you might not think of. Across town, across oceans. You power hope. You power comfort. You are the ear that listens to the stories that yearn to be told. The hand that soothes the spirit that survived the unthinkable. You are there in the darkest of times, and no matter how furious the storm, you are there to rebuild, to reimagine, to usher in a new day. You are the legs that refuse to buckle, the feet that take a proud stand. You have the power to do whatever must be done to strengthen our community, now and into the future.
Now, I am thrilled to welcome our special guest speaker, Dr. Deborah Lipstadt. She has published and taught about the Holocaust and anti-Semitism for over 40 years and is a champion of facts, a courtroom dynamo, and speaks truth to power. She has been nominated by President Biden and will be confirmed very soon as the special envoy to monitor and combat anti-Semitism. You can read her full biography on the screen below.
Deborah will be in conversation with Julie Chaikin. Julie is an entrepreneur and was founder of Chaikin, a San Francisco-based clothing line. She was honored as Woman to Watch by Jewish Women International. Julie's full bio is also below. And now, a warm welcome to Deborah and Julie.
Hi, Deborah.
Hi there.
Hi, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. Your federation is one of my favorites. I'm sort of an unofficial, I consider myself an unofficial fellow traveler. So I'm there often enough. So it's I'm sorry I can't be there in person, but this is great.
Well, we will look forward to having you out here soon when travel's a little easier.
Amen.
Yeah. So, okay. So I want to dive right in. And ask you a bunch of questions. And, there's so many things to ask you. We'll try and limit it, and we'll try and see where we get in this half hour. But let's start with, so the verdict is in. There were not good people on both sides. And the jury convicted with a large penalty for the alt-right and the neo-Nazis, saying they did have the intent to intimidate. And excuse me, that was not, that was just a little extra sound effect. But you were a key witness in this trial. So what was the experience like, and why is the verdict so important?
Well, first of all, it was a surrealistic experience, as I told, I think, the Huffington Post or some newspaper afterwards, because though I was on trial in England and my trial went on for 10 weeks, I didn't give testimony there because I was being sued for what I wrote. And my lawyer said, nothing you can add. He's suing you for what you wrote. So there's no point in putting you on the stand. And that's a choice in libel trials in England. So this was the first time I actually gave testimony. And it was also strange because the mass and fewer people in the courtroom, the jury sitting separate, et cetera. But once I got into it, it was pretty straightforward. But what I tried to do a couple of things. First of all, I tried to stress to the jury that this wasn't just a gathering of people coming to rally about something about with which I might agree or disagree, or they might agree or disagree, but this was a call to arms. When you go over what they said, and by the way, all of it's in my expert report, which is in the public domain now. It's on the website of Integrity First for America, IFA, and you just go to Charlottesville case and you'll find my expert report. I went through reams of emails, different communiques, statements they made, speeches, videos, and what I found a pattern. It wasn't, as I said a moment ago, come to a rally. It was a call to arms. Come prepared to do battle. They didn't say it, or do battle for our cause. They sent out emails, something to the effect of, next stop Charlottesville, last stop Auschwitz.
Oh,
You know, they talked, they exchanged communiques, and at parties before the rally, they talked about using cars to mow down spectators. And they did. They killed Heather Heyer with a car. And in fact, before I left Charlottesville, after about 2.5 days there, one day on the stand and one day doing follow-up, the last place I went before I went to the airport was where Heather Heyer was killed. And I went with every place I went, I had armed guards, even when I went out walking in the morning. So it was a strange experience. The strangest part, of course, was the defendants. I thought they'd all want to have a go at me, especially Richard Spencer of alt-right and things like that. He didn't. One did, Chris Cantwell, who's called the crying Nazi, because after the rally, he was on tape crying, and he said it was tear gas, but it sure didn't look like tear gas.
mm-hmm.
And he tried to get me to agree that the Holocaust was a subject for jokes. Wasn't it just, these are just jokes? That's one of their strategies. Oh, these were jokes. When we said we're going to mow people down, it's just a joke. And I said to him, I don't think any genocide, irrespective of who the victims are, what their race is, what their nationality is, what their gender is, but any genocide that takes 6 million lives, that murders 6 million people, is a topic for a joke. And he looked up at me and then he said, no more questions. So I felt a little frustrated by that, but the lawyers were very pleased, and they were pleased with the verdict too.
Well, I think that it will have long-term ramifications of how they all behave. I mean, one of the things is that so many people were surprised to see Richard Spencer and his followers all cleaned up with their, polo shirts and their khakis, and to hear them spewing such hate. He got really close to getting away with what he was trying to do and changing the dynamic.
That's absolutely it. This was a civil suit.
Yeah.
The guy who drove the car that mowed down Heather Heyer and severely injured number of other people is in jail. But most of the organizers have gotten away scot-free. And the point of this trial, remember, they took on 24 defendants, organizations and individuals, was to essentially to bankrupt them, to make them pay so that they wouldn't do this again. Yeah. Now, some of them don't have the means, I think, to pay the damages that were assessed. But anytime they earn anything, there'll be a lien. They'll feel it. And what we hope is that it will be a deterrent to future groups to do this. But it wasn't a rally. They didn't just come to protest, take a statue, don't take down a statue. They came to do violence. And it started the first night when they marched across the lawn, the famed lawn, the sacred space of the University of Virginia, Mr. Jefferson's lawn, with tiki torches chanting, "Jews will not replace us."
Yeah, well, you've said in the past that words matter. Should we be concerned that the words aren't getting more coverage in general until it's so overt that you can't ignore it?
Too often people, it's just words. Oh, it was just a joke. Oh, we've heard this before. I think that we have to pay more attention to what people say. Look, no genocide ever began with someone standing up and cold saying, let's go kill people. It always begins with words. I was in Rwanda. In fact, I was in Rwanda with a number of members of the San Francisco Jewish Federation a couple of years ago, and they didn't just broadcast from the Congo, go kill Tutsis. They started with words. They started with vilification. They started with venom. Words matter.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things the defendants are, it's just a joke. It's just a joke. There's no such thing as just a joke. You can have jokes, but you can have mean jokes. You can have jokes that inspire others to do harm. And I very much believe words matter, and we should be careful about what we say. We have a right to say it, but that doesn't mean that your institution, your university, your church, your whatever community center has to invite these people in to be free to say.
Yeah. So in your book, you talk about like the 4 or maybe 5 kinds of anti-Semites. But there's one that you don't specifically call out or spend much time talking about in the book, which is kind of like the Jewish anti-Semite. And
yeah, I do refer obliquely, but you're absolutely correct. We used to talk about, people would talk about he or she's a self-hating Jew. I think that term is outdated. I think a lot of the people who are critical, et cetera, they're not self-hating Jews. They're very proud of themselves. I'm so open to new ideas kind of thing. But it's the person who says, I'm not like other Jews, or makes cracks about Jews. Look, Jews have developed a whole genre of humor. I think Mel Brooks just came out with a new autobiography today, or it comes out tomorrow, whatever. And that's just Carl Reiner. We could spend the whole evening just talking about it. We laugh at ourselves and make fun of ourselves, and that's one of the reasons I think it's helped us survive. But there are some people who use jokes in a very mean, deprecating way. And there are some Jews who do that, or some Jews who sometimes Jews will start as a Jew, I want to say, I disagree with Israel. I disagree with that. Now, it's okay to disagree with Israel. I disagree with Israel on some things. I disagree with America on some things. Doesn't make me anti either one.
mm-hmm.
But it's sort of a way of their own bona fides gives me the right to say this kind of thing.
So
go ahead.
I wanted to ask you, like, it's very confusing to me, and I imagine to many, but somebody like Josh Mandel out of Ohio, who is very nationalist and says some things you wouldn't expect for a Jewish man to say.
Yeah, Josh Mandel is a strange example. I mean, I'm not in Ohio, but I do read the national press and some of the coverage from there. And he has said some very weird things about this country being a Christian country. I mean, it's a majority Christian country, that's for sure. But I don't know what's going on there. I don't think he typifies a lot of people, but it is very disturbing. It's very disturbing when you see your own sort of letting themselves be used, or whatever it might be, in a way that is disturbing. So I don't know that much about him, but the things that I've read have been disturbing.
Yeah. So one of the things I love how you talk about in the book, especially when you're responding to the college student and she's asking questions, where you talk about how anti-Zionism has become thinly cloaked anti-Semitism, and how it kind of gets laid over other issues in this country. And I think a lot of people from the right, from the left, of all ages, are still a little unsure or how to connect the dots on that. Maybe you could help us.
Sure. Look, up until 1948, maybe a little earlier, there were Jewish groups that didn't want a Jewish state, were afraid of a Jewish state, were afraid that if there was a Jewish state, it would diminish their standing in their home state. In fact, there were Jews who wanted to make sure that the citizens of this new Jewish state would not be called Jews, but would be called Israelis, to differentiate. But we're 70 years later. We're in a country with a population of over 6 million Jews. Half the Jews in the world live in the state of Israel. And first of all, people say, well, they should just go remember Helen Thomas, the famed reporter who's now passed away, but when someone said, well, where do you think they should go? They should all go back to Poland. Well, hello, over 50% of the Jews in Israel are not Ashkenazi, of the Ashkenazi origin. They come from North Africa, they come from Ethiopia, they come from the Middle Eastern countries, they come from Yemen. It's to ignore the reality of what the state is. And it's also when you say, oh, just do away with the state and we'll have a binational state and we'll have, everyone will live in harmony and sing Kumbaya or whatever the equivalent would be. I'd say, you don't find many states, certainly in the Muslim world, where that's a common occurrence. It's a very flip way to say it. Now, is there room to criticize Israel? Of course, and we all do. And if you want to hear criticism of Israel, I'll tell you the best place to go, of Israeli policies. The best place to go is to the Knesset and listen to the opposition. That's one of the things that there is that freedom to criticize. But what we do find, and it's not in all cases, but so I'm not throwing a generalization over everyone, but we do find that in many cases, you'll find people who are anti-Semites who know that when you speak overt anti-Semitic things, people dismiss you. They discount you. They say you're prejudiced, whatever. So sometimes they will apply those things to Israel. And I'm not talking about all criticism of Israel. I want to stress that. Or sometimes you'll find people who are critical of Israel and then find the way that they are critical is by using anti-Semitic tropes, anti-Semitic memes, anti-Semitic themes, so very often it backs into that kind of thing. I do think that if you say Jews don't have the right to a state, that's pretty close. I have to ask where that's coming from. And to me, that often, not everyone, but often is motivated by a hostility and antipathy towards Jews, which we call anti-Semitism.
Yeah, well, it's, here in Marin, we've seen anti-Semitic things happening where, they were making the list of all the Jewish kids at one of the high schools, and then somebody else was posting swastikas on the trees, and the district attorney kind of didn't know what to do with it, didn't know where to go with it, didn't know how to charge people. And I think as a community, there's still some learning. We had the luxury of living in a functional democracy for so long where we weren't faced with this stuff on a daily basis. And so we're now kind of like having to mobilize. And one of the questions I have for you is how do you better prepare the kids to recognize and understand the anti-Semitism, and then for college kids to know what they're looking or listening for? And
well, I would say there are really two things that have to be done here. First and foremost, it's going to sound very strange to answer of a question about anti-Semitism, is we can't just educate our children, our young people, and even our adults, but certainly our young people, to what Jews should be against. In other words, we have to give them the positive motivation. There's no, speaking as a historian, there's no rhyme or reason why Jews should exist on the face of the earth. If you look at history, we should have disappeared when Christianity was adopted by Rome as the dominant religion. We should have disappeared in the Middle Ages when Jews were oppressed terribly in many places. We should have disappeared in the pogroms in pogroms in Russia. We should have disappeared after the Holocaust. The Holocaust, 1 out of every 3 Jews on the face of the earth was murdered. The fact that Jews wanted to be Jews after that, it wasn't just, there's a saying in Hebrew, dafka lahachis, just to make the anti-Semites angry. It wasn't. It was because they felt a positive thing. It's we're celebrating Hanukkah tonight, and it's that joy, that feeling of connectedness, that feeling this is our culture, this is our heritage, this has belonged to us for generations. Whether you're a Jew of generations or you've just joined up, and we love having you, but this is who you're part of. You're part of this fabric, this incredible cultural, religious, intellectual, scholarly, artistic fabric of Jewish life. And, you know, some of us have been to the museum in Warsaw, Poland, and you see the fabulous wooden roof and the painted synagogues. I mean, there were great things that existed and were destroyed, and some preserved. And that's who we are. And so we fight first you have to instill in the kids the positive. You know, the little kids who come home. Last night I was in Columbia, South Carolina, participating in the menorah lighting in front of the state capitol, and two little kids from their Jewish day school spoke, and one of them talked, looked like they were 8 or 9 maybe, and he talked about the 9-foot floppy blow up menorah on his front lawn. And I was just thrilled. I wanted to eat him up. I wanted to go to his front lawn and steal his menorah and put it on my front lawn next year. But that there has to be that joy, and then there can be the joy. So the first thing we do is instill in them who they are, and pride and joy in who they are. And there are many ways of doing that. And I know San Francisco does it very well. And then we explain to them and we teach them that anti-Semitism is a prejudice like other hatreds. Prejudged. People have made up their mind who Jews are and what you are. You show up in your class in Marin County, they look at you and they assume you're rich, you're powerful, you're conniving, you're sneaky. Why? Because you're a Jew. That's a prejudice, just like racism. Now, some of the kids who may be doing that are putting the swastikas up on trees or leaving the swastika on a student's desk or whatever it might be. They don't even know what they're doing. Yeah. But what it says to us is they know that to make my Jewish classmate angry, to embarrass him, to humiliate him, these are the things I should do. So in other words, what it's a reflection of is the kind of anti-Semitism, not clueless anti-Semitism where you just assume a Jew is powerful because they're Jewish, or they're rich because they're Jewish, or something like that. But a sense that I know this makes you angry and I'm going to do it, but you don't really understand what it's about. And that's where education is so important. It's a tough call. I can't give you a 10-point program of exactly how to do it. But to understand that it comes from a certain ignorance, but it's not just ignorance, it's also a reflection of how deep into the atmosphere anti-Semitism is, and therefore how hard it is to uproot it.
Yeah, I think that it's pretty deeply ingrained, and people don't even realize what they're saying or doing and propagating.
It's properly called. Professor Robert Wistrick, the blessed memory, who was professor for many years at the Hebrew University, wrote a book, and I forget if the title was either The Longest Hatred or The Oldest Hatred. It's both. It is the oldest, longest existing hatred.
Yeah, doesn't seem to be going away either. So we're in the middle of the holidays, and here, I always think of Hanukkah as we're celebrating some pretty badass Jewish warriors. And the fight continues. So it's, we're just in the middle of it. Another 2,000 years, we'll probably still be having some version of this conversation.
Absolutely. Look, I love that description, badass Jewish warriors. And later tonight, when I go light Hanukkah candles, I'm going to use it. But they were fighting because they wanted to live their cultural, religious life. In other words, they weren't fighting because we want to win, or we just want to destroy you, or you're our enemy, but you're not allowing us to live as Jews. So it goes back to what I was saying earlier. They were fighting for, not just against.
Yeah. So when you get into all of this, and talking to college students today, mean, because what we're seeing in our communities is a little different than what's happening on campus. So maybe you could talk a little bit or kind of share with us what you're seeing that's different than even when you wrote the books. As you,
not surprisingly, the situation has become worse. That there's and I wouldn't say it's prevalent on every campus, or a Jewish kid goes to a campus and is going to feel oppressed as a Jew or something like that. But they may think twice about wearing a Jewish star. I've started to wear a Jewish star. I started 2 years ago. And I found my friend is a jeweler, and she makes anybody interested, contact me. I'll tell you how to get in touch with her. Okay. And because I didn't want to pass. But many Jewish kids, I know Jewish kids that, well, you know, when I go to Hillel for Shabbat dinner, but I just tell my friends I'm busy that night because I just don't want to get in. I'll give you an example. Right before COVID shut us all down, there was an APAC conference in Washington, and I spoke at the conference, and I spoke to some of the college students. And I said, you know, I used the example of a student may be accepted to a birthright program. And 5 years ago, they would have gone running down the hall screaming, I got into the program. I'm getting a free trip to Israel. I'm going for 10 days in winter break or summer, whatever. Now, sometimes some of them say, I'm going overseas, or I'm going to be away, or I'm going to the Middle East. They go, but they're just quiet about it, not because they think anyone's going to attack them. They just don't want to get into the debate. So a young student from a very fine university approaches me. Now, he was the leader on his campus, I believe it was NYU, I'm not sure, of a group of pro-Israel students. So he had organized this group. And he said to me, I have to tell you that what you said resonated with me. When I was leaving campus on Friday to come down to Washington for the weekend and for the APAC conference, I told, when my classmates, I'm a political science major, asked me what I was doing, I said, I'm going to a foreign policy conference. He said, I just didn't want to say I'm going to a conference about Israel. It's exhausting. And here's a student who's organized the group. So what I'm afraid of is students, less the overt anti-Semitism, because most universities, if it's really overt, they know how to deal with it. What I'm afraid of is Jewish students becoming shashtil Jews, because look, you know, you have such magnificent structures in San Francisco, your JCC, so many things. We've spent the past 3-4 decades coming out, and I put it in big quotation marks, coming out of the closet as Jews. We don't feel we have to be shashtil, very proud, happy, celebratory. I don't want us to retreat from that.
I don't want to see that. I don't think anyone wants to see it. And unfortunately, I think Europe's leading the way on this one. But let's talk about something, I know it's kind of a funny twist on it, but like something positive, which is you've been nominated by President Biden to be the special envoy to combat and monitor anti-Semitism. So what do you hope the position's going to allow you to do that you haven't been able to do so far?
Well, since they've had a special envoy position now for a couple of administrations, I think the first time was under President Obama when Secretary of State Clinton, and then, of course, in the Trump administration, and now this. But what's happened, in my case, is that the position has been elevated by a bipartisan group of senators. We often don't use that word we use that word too little, or we're able to use that word too little, to an ambassador, level of an ambassador, which means I have to be confirmed by the Senate. So I'm waiting for hearings before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and hopefully for confirmation. And so I can't tell you what my agenda is because I don't know yet. It's going to be, of course, you're part of a bigger bureaucracy, but it's of great importance, I know, to Secretary of State Blinken, to whom I will directly report if I am confirmed. But the question I'm often asked is, Deborah, you have an endowed chair at a fine first-rate university. You teach only a few courses a year. You get to write your books. You do your research. I'm surrounded by this. I'm trying to finish a book. You know, you travel where you want, you say what you want. Why do you want to do this? And I said, because I was talking, when I was considering it, someone said to me, Deborah, you can make a difference. And I can think of no better epitaph. I don't mean I hope to be around for a long time, that you can make a difference. And then once I put my name in, I happened to have been in England. There was a period where you could actually travel and I had to go be quarantined, etc. But I have a good friend in England, happens to be the daughter of the late Rabbi Jonathan, Lord Jonathan Sachs. And I knew Rabbi Sachs not well, but we were friends. And I said to her, I said, Gila, I wish your father was still alive. Because, I don't know, should I be giving up my academic scholarly career for this? What do you think he would have said? She knew her father very well. She was the one who gave the eulogy at his funeral, et cetera. And she's a very talented and smart young woman. And she said, I know exactly what my father would have said. When you're called, you serve.
Mm-hmm. Well, we very much look forward to seeing what you are able to impact and influence. And let's hope the Senate will wake up and get this process going.
From your mouth to God's ear, as some of our grandparents used to say.
Yeah. So, Deborah, thank you so much for sitting with us today. And it's really informative. We're really lucky to have you today. And so now I get the honor of throwing this to Joyce Asiski.
I'm going to add just one thing before
okay.
you do that. We've got, I see 1 or 2 minutes.
Okay.
I was especially anxious to do this because when I was on trial in England, and we saw that the cost of that trial for my defense would be about $1.5 million, maybe $2 million. And thank God I get nicely paid, but I didn't have $2 million to spend on a lawsuit. Yeah. And there was a push in the Jewish community that we've got to put together a defense fund because this has to be fought right. Otherwise, the deniers will get a victory, and we can't allow that. Mm-hmm. The San Francisco Jewish Federation was one of the federations that stood up to the plate right away and said, we're here, we're going to handle this, we're going to do this, we're going to raise a significant portion, and we're going to do it quietly, and we're going to do it quickly. And they did, and I am forever thankful. And more than just me being thankful, I think everyone who was touched, which is every Jew, by the Holocaust, should be thankful. So in a time of Hanukkah, when we show our gratitude, I am grateful.
That's wonderful. And it just goes to show the power of community, which is what we are here talking about today and gathering, although virtually. But let's hope you don't have to have another lawsuit.
Amen. From your
and but I love hearing that San Francisco was supportive.
Outstanding. Outstanding.
I do have to throw it to Joy, but I'm really glad you kind of brought that up. And Joy is our Chief Philanthropy Officer at Federation. So again, thank you. And
thank you all. Chag Sameach. I'm very happy Hanukkah.
Chag Sameach.
Thank you to Deborah and Julie. And thank you so much to our Lions and Pomegranates for your commitments. We hope you will all join us in a few minutes in the Schmooze Rooms, hosted by several of our host committee members by clicking on the icon on the left side of your screen. I want to express how the Federation takes action on combating anti-Semitism. We do it by directly funding initiatives and partnering with allies through education, advocacy, dialogue, and security. Our partners educate youth about the Holocaust and the need to stand up to hate, like the Holocaust Center of Northern California. They build bridges and advocate around specific hotspot situations, like Jewish Community Relations Council, our largest grantee. And they are the first-line responders to community members experiencing anti-Semitism and hate, like at our Hillels. The Federation itself has expert professionals coordinating communication on security issues and advising local organizations to make their facilities safe for our community. We also advocate in coalition with Jewish organizations statewide to combat anti-Semitism, most recently securing a California K-12 ethnic studies model curriculum free of bias. These are all examples of how the Federation has a vast network of relationships, resources, and knowledge to make a collaborative impact not only within our own community, but in Israel and worldwide. It's what positions us to solve the most complex communal challenges. So thank you to those of you who have already made your commitment to the Federation's 2022 annual campaign, but there's still time for those of you who have not. Everyone who has made their commitment by midnight tonight will receive a copy of Deborah's book, Anti-Semitism Here and Now. We are incredibly inspired by your trust in us, and as we move forward, we will continue to work with our partners to prioritize community needs today and in the future. We're doing exactly what federations were made to do, creating places where everyone feels secure, inspired, and engaged. Thank you for joining us tonight, and happy Hanukkah! See you in the schmooze rooms.